folks, the Filipina P here. And today I've got something a little different for you. I get so many questions about the same topics that I thought I'd answer a few of them right now instead of making an entire video about each one later on. While I'm not always able to respond to every comment or request, I do read them all. And here are some of the questions I get asked most often. The first one comes from Peter M., who says, I met a Filipina online that I'm really interested in. We seem to be perfect match in every department except one. I know she wants to have children, but I'm afraid to tell her that I don't. What's the best way to handle the situation? Well, Peter, you've hit on a very touchy subject for some couples, one that's often ignored or procrastinated about, especially early in a relationship so that things aren't spoiled before you've had a chance to bond with each other. But I'm afraid it's the beginning of a relationship where you need to discuss it to avoid some big problems down the road. In many cases, this isn't an issue, and both parties see eye to eye. But in the case of a much older man with a very young woman, someone's probably gonna have to give in. Now, everyone that's watched my videos knows that I don't have a problem with large age gaps as long as everyone's cards are on the table. But many times, the child card is left off the sleeve and not shown until it's too late. I personally know of several mixed couple relationships that have either ended or are in the process of ending for this very reason. Unlike in the West, where procreating is an open question to be considered, I really need you guys to understand that it's much more of an imperative here. Provincial girls, especially, are mandated to reproduce. They expect it. Their families expect it. And the church wants it for making more Catholics. Sometimes, maybe even subconsciously, it's in order to have someone to care for them in their old age after you're gone. And on top of all that, a Filipina is aware that having a mixed blood baby with a foreigner, what we call a mestiza, is also a status symbol that's highly prized. So telling her you'll marry her but won't have kids is like giving her a Ferrari by refusing to give her the keys. The end result of all these forces is that it's so ingrained into the society here that it may be very hard to find a Filipina that doesn't want children. I took an informal survey among friends and family and found to no one's surprise that most Filipinas will not pursue a relationship with a man that doesn't include kids in his plans for the future. This is potentially a serious problem for foreigner Filipino relationships, especially where large age gaps exist. Yes, there are older men that want another child or two. And yes, there are sometimes young Filipinas that don't want children or already have enough, but it's rare. What often happens is that men will stall, delay, or give vague, we'll see answers in order to give some time for a relationship to deepen, knowing full well that they don't want kids. For example, we can look at Ed and Rose from the season of the TV series 90 Day Fiancé. Ed knew that Rose wanted children. They even discussed it. But Ed withheld the fact that he was planning to have a vasectomy and had no intention of having another child. And yet he let the relationship progress to the point where I love yous were exchanged. The couple was discussing marriage, and Ed had flown halfway around the world to see her. After they'd slept together, of course, he finally confessed his secret. And needless to say, they're no longer together. But it's not just the men that play games with the subject of children. Sometimes a Filipino will say she's okay with remaining childless, but she thinks to herself, if he really loves me, I can change his mind after I snag him. And he realizes how much I want a child. Ladies, that's just as dishonest as the man who only tells you what you want to hear. In either case, there are going to be long term problems because the question was never honestly dealt with. Unlike an argument over which restaurant to eat at, this one has the potential to wreck your entire future together. What to do? Well, I advise you to discuss it right off the bat. If you have differences that'll eventually torpedo your relationship, why not discuss them now instead of waiting till you're both hopelessly in love? That's a formula for heartbreak. And if you think it's a good idea to keep her in the dark about your plans until you go and meet her, all you're doing is postponing the inevitable. Talk it out now. If it's a deal breaker for her, she has a right to know. Sorry, Peter. The next question comes from Sam H., who says, I'm from the US and have never been to the Philippines, but I'd like to know if I could live a good life there on $1,300 a month. Well, that's a loaded question because of the phrase a good life. It'd be like me asking, how much does it cost to live a good life in the US? Well, it depends on where you live and what lifestyle you consider to be acceptable, and the figure can vary greatly. The exact same thing is true here, and there are as many different opinions as there are expats. Some people say they can make it on 500 US dollars a month, but that's very basic living without much room for error or unexpected expenses. I've heard many other expats say that the magic number is somewhere between 1200 to 1500 a month. But then I've talked to others that swear you have to have at least $2,000 a month to live well. So, who's right? Well, obviously, it's going to depend on your lifestyle. What's the minimum size living quarters that'll satisfy you? A studio apartment or a three-bedroom townhouse? Do you want AC running most of the time? Do you need a car? Can your body handle cheap street food or do you have special dietary needs? Do you want to travel a lot or are you a homebody? Are you only supporting yourself or are you paying for you and the Filipina? Maybe her kids and family too. Since there are too many variables to give a set dollar amount, let me take a minute to explain a few things that some of you may not know. Then perhaps you can get a better idea of what amount you'll need. First, your biggest expense will probably be your rent. The good news is that the rent is pretty cheap here. In most towns other than the big cities, you can get a very small apartment by your standards for around $250 a month. Even if you want to rent a huge five-bedroom palace with a pool and a manicured lawn worthy of a Hollywood star, you can often find them for 1 to 2,000 a month. So moving to the Philippines will definitely save you money on rent. Professional services such as doctors, lawyers, and dentists are also relatively cheap here. You can get a tooth filled for about $12, a basic doctor's visit for around $10, and an hour-long consultation with a top attorney for just $10 to $20 an hour. Water here is also very cheap, and even in a medium-sized city, your monthly bill will run less than $10, usually way less. But now for the bad news. Electricity here is pretty expensive depending on where you live. And if you like your AC, you can easily run up an electric bill over $100 a month. Electronics here are very pricey, and you can expect to pay up to double the US prices for the same things. Appliances too are much more expensive here. A clothes dryer might be $400 in the US, but costs $700 to $1,000 in the Philippines. And that's if you can even find one that's not a plastic toy-sized piece of junk that breaks within a month. Very few Filipinos use washers and dryers. Even wealthy people just get someone else to do it by hand. And good luck going into a store here in a small town and asking for a vacuum cleaner. Don't be surprised when the sales lady shows you a broom and gives you a blank look when you try to describe what you're looking for. And don't make sucking sounds and hand gestures in the shape of a hose, because you're just gonna get slapped. Even something as simple as a microwave oven is considered a luxury item not found in most homes. You can find them in the stores, but they're just used for heating food. Because get this, we have no microwavable food here. Yep, all you bachelors out there who survive on lean cuisine and hot pockets are gonna have to find a different way to feed yourselves, because you won't find that stuff here. The last time I saw a microwave meal was at a Western food store in Cebu. They only had one meal on offer, a tiny sized portion of chicken and noodles. The box was flattened, the corners torn, and it looked like it crossed the ocean underneath a pallet of bricks. And it was $6. No thanks. So depending on how you usually eat, you'll be making some changes in that department too. And if you're gonna start cooking your own food, get ready for a few more surprises. Unless you're rich, You can pretty much say goodbye to steak unless you enjoy thin, sad looking cuts of something they'll assure you is beef and at a ridiculously high price. Sometimes foreigners expect food here to be plentiful and cheap, but I hate to tell you, it's not. Expect your grocery bill to be about the same as in the West, and if you want the same kind of food you were eating back home, expect to pay a lot. So, anyway, it's really difficult to tell you how much money you'll need to live a good life here, whatever that means to you. But to be on the safe side, try using this formula. Calculate your total budget back home, subtract your rent or mortgage, and whatever figure you're left with, take about 60% of that. Now add back in a reasonable Filipino rent, and that should give you a general idea of how much it would cost to live a similar life here. You can get by on much less, of course, but it won't be the way you're living now. And no matter what your budget, remember that you're gonna need to make all sorts of adjustments to your quality of life. And many of the things you're used to just don't exist here at any price. Hope that helped. And the final question comes from Jimmy J, who asked me, why does my Filipino girlfriend never know when I'm just joking with her? Are all Filipinos so serious? Ah, the question of humor. While it's true that humor is a universal thing and all people laugh, except maybe my parents, the things that make us laugh are very different between our two cultures. You know how people refer to a British sense of humor and say it's different from American comedy? But if you ask them how it's different, they'll often say, I just know it when I hear it. Well, it's kind of the same thing here. Filipinos like visual comedy, slapstick humor, people falling out of chairs or getting hit in the nuts. We don't pull elaborate pranks on each other like you guys sometimes do, and we don't have a lot of complicated build up to our jokes. They tend to be simpler form of comedy. If you say something we don't understand or don't find funny, we'll probably smile and laugh right along with you just to be polite. But the thing that really sets us apart is the concept of sarcasm. Filipinos just don't get sarcasm. We assume that you mean everything you say. So if you jokingly tell your housekeeper that you'll feed her to the pigs the next time she cooks stinky dried fish inside the house, even if you're smiling on your face when you do it, expect her to spend a few sleepless nights contemplating her gruesome demise. It's just the way we are. So that's it for this episode of Ask the P. I hope you found it informative and entertaining. And I'll do another one once I get some more good questions to answer. Till next time, folks. And here's a bonus question from Dizzy Dean, who writes, Dear P, I wonder if you could give me your thoughts on my situation. I've been chatting with a Filipina I met online about 2 years ago. I bought her a small condo and I've been sending $200 a week to support her and her children. And I finally went to visit her in Makati last December. But when I got there, I found out that her ex-husband had moved into the place I bought, and she was living with him the whole time. She told me she was sorry she lied. She kicked him out and I forgave her. But now that I'm back in Canada, I find out that she's pregnant too, and it can't possibly be mine. And apparently she's still legally married because she's asking for $10,000 to get an annulment. I really love this girl, so what should I do? Well, that's easy. Watch all my old videos, punch yourself in the face for me, then run away from that woman as fast as you can. Good night. Just one last thing before you go. If you think about it, I'm kind of like your waitress, bringing hot, fresh content to the table and serving it to you every week. The only thing I ask for my hard work is that you leave a small tip in the form of a thumbs up on this video, subscribing to my channel, hitting the notification bell so you know when your next meal has been served, and sharing this video with friends. I promise it'll only take 10 seconds to do, and your tip will make my day. You wouldn't want to stiff your waitress now, would ya? And for dessert, please enjoy my other videos too. See you real soon.